Welcome. Thank you for joining us. My name is Sue DeCaro, and I'm here with my good friend and colleague, Erin Taylor. And today we are interviewing this amazing woman, Dr. Shefali Tsabary, who we know and love. Dr. Shefali received her doctorate in clinical psychology from Columbia University. Specializing in the integration of Western psychology and Eastern philosophy, Dr. Shefali brings together the best of both worlds for her clients. She is an expert in family dynamics and personal development and runs a private practice in New York City. Dr. Shefali has written 3 books, including the award-winning New York bestseller book, The Conscious Parent. Dr. Shefali is also a keynote speaker who has presented at TED Talks, Kellogg Business School, the Dalai Lama Center for Peace and Education, and other conferences and workshops around the world. She has been featured on Oprah Winfrey's Super Soul Sunday and Oprah's Life Class. Welcome, Dr. Shefali. We're so glad you're here with us today.
I am too. Thank you for having me.
We are so excited about the release of your new book, The Awakened Family. And we can't wait to get it in our hands next week. So can you tell us, you say, not just probably in this book, but in all of your work, you say that most parental anxiety is rooted in fear. Can you explain that a little bit more?
In all my work, we can only change our children's lives or influence them if we parents are aware of what's happening within us. If we're not aware of what's happening within us, then we are putting onto our children, it's called projecting onto our children, all sorts of things that really don't even come from our children themselves. Fear, I've understood now in my own journey as a parent and interviewing so many parents and doing therapy with so many parents, that this fear seems to underpin in a huge way the parent-child dynamic. Why? Well, for many reasons. One, no one is more intimate to us, I believe, than our children, right? They are ours. And this possession and this great deep love actually turns into something quite anxiety-ridden for the parent, because now you fear for them. You not only fear for them, you fear for yourself and your own well-being were something to happen to them. There's a great enmeshment that occurs in this dynamic between parent and child because of the intimacy, because of the closeness, because of the biological or, say, adoptive relationship, because of the longevity of this relationship, because you're responsible for these children. All these things create this intense enmeshment where you don't know where you begin and where your children end. Fear then becomes the foundation because they now represent who you are. So you have a deep, deep attachment to how they turn out. If they're not feeling happy, you're not going to be happy. If they're not successful, somehow you're going to interpret that as, I'm not a good parent. So everything they do becomes a mirror to your own being. So if we don't examine, who am I? Am I whole on my own? Am I standing in my own worth? Am I abundant, separate from my child? Then quite naturally all the stuff gets put on our children, and then they have to carry it for us.
Well, thank you. That's beautiful. How can parents help their children with test anxiety and homework problems? With this fear that parents have, of course, they, as you mentioned, they sometimes project that fear onto their children. So if their children have anxiety with homework, anxiety with tests, how can they avoid making their children more stressed by putting pressure on them?
So the first step in this journey of consciousness is to recognize that you're going to be working against the tide of a mass unconsciousness. And when you become aware of this, the unconsciousness shows up even more outside of you. And you begin to realize, wow, my family of origin was really unconscious. Or, wow, the education system or the political system or people around me are really unconscious. And I don't want people to become judgy and hierarchical and superior because now they're conscious. But you begin to become aware of this. How is this related to your question? When you now become conscious and you notice your child going to school, which is run on mainstream principles, you then become aware of this great unconsciousness that exists in the education system. And you begin to see how anxiety is almost created and perpetuated by the education system as it stands today. Grades and outcome and performance, they become the main mission for your child's school life versus curiosity, learning, process, discovery, engagement. So now you're at a crossroads. You're like, okay, I'm learning all this in consciousness. I believe in curiosity, engagement, being, owning your learning, discovering your truths, playing to your strengths. And then you have this mainstream unconscious system, which just puts everyone in one box, asks everyone to be the same, and doesn't tailor the education to each child, and then makes them play for grades. Mm-hmm. So now you're at a crossroads. So now you sent your kid to school. You may not have the funds or the means or the luxury to send them to private school, and even private schools are mainly run on traditional principles. So now what do you do as a parent, right? So now here's your question. What do we do? Well, the first thing to do is ask yourself, where do you stand on this crossroad, right? Are you kind of here but pretending you're here? Then you're not going to be conscious. If you are really here, are you ready to not be here at all and face the consequences and take ownership of them and teach your child to come here while being here? You can do that. But it takes a deep understanding of where you stand on this crossroad. And I tell parents, you can't play both games. You can't tell your child, oh, I'm conscious and I believe in your well-being and I want you to really be joyful and learning for the sake of learning, and then yell at them when they get a C grade. You have to decide where you stand philosophically. And it's a big test. It's a big trap. Because every time your kid comes home with an A grade or an A+, they're watching to see how much you buy into the sizzling, tantalizing, achievement-based model. How excited are you getting? You can't get too excited if you don't buy into this. In the same way, you can't get too annoyed if they get a C grade. So how you respond is setting them up to have a relationship with outcome, achievement, and grades as indicators of their identity. We have to watch it. You don't get a free pass when they get an A grade and then have to suddenly show up in consciousness as in the C grade. Many parents tell me, oh, I did conscious parenting. My kid came home with a C grade. I passed the test. I didn't yell and scream. But then when the kid gets an A grade, you're jumping around, throwing a party. Can't do that either. Mm-hmm. In both aspects, you have to stay neutral, understand that they are just one facet of your child's expression. They do not define your child's identity. And yeah, you can be a little, wow, you got an A grade. How does that feel for you? But I would say the same reaction for, wow, you got a C grade. How does that feel for you? How can I help you either way? Are you owning it? Are you buying into your own learning? That's the principle we want to institute. So it all starts with where we stand in the traditional versus conscious model.
Beautiful. Thank you. So now we've covered school. Let's move to summer vacation. So I know that summer vacation can be a stressful time for parents, a time that kids are really looking forward to, but then maybe the structure falls away because they're not going to school. Some parents have their kids in camp, some don't, some have a mix of different things. But I know that in my daily travels, I come across lots of parents around this time of year who are kind of bracing themselves for, oh my gosh, only 3 more weeks of school. What am I going to do with my kids? What advice would you have for parents to kind of move into summer in the best frame of mind to make the most of it with their kids?
So notwithstanding those parents who have to work, and I understand for most parents who work that their kids have to go to some sort of structured activity. So leaving those parents aside, because those parents are just sending their kids to camp or structured activities because that's the framework of their context, right? Either self-imposed or unwillingly tethered to, that's what has been created in their lives. So let's leave those parents aside because I think they kind of do what they need to do. Let's talk about the parents who are kind of at home with their kids and now are feeling the pressure of, what am I going to do? Well, this is a new age phenomenon. You and I remember times where we were in summer and nothing was done for us. I mean, I don't know whether you remember, but I grew up in India and nothing was done. I mean, summer was a time for unraveling, unfolding, and being. Yes, today the being comes with a phone, and screens are in every room. And I think that's what parents are scared of. What do I do if my kid wants to just be on the screen? How do I create engagement that is better than the screen? Because say the screen was taken out, like it was in our time, well, then there was no option, right? Of course, you had to deal with a bored kid, but for the most part, parents left us to our own imagination and our creativity. This modern age phenomenon of having kids bombarded by screens and then having to create something that's better than screens, that takes energy, commitment, presence, and then also the parents' own desire to enter mainstream, do, achieve, produce. Someone needs to look like we did something. What did we do this summer? Did we do anything fancy? Did we volunteer in Africa? Did we go on a trip? It seems to be this pledge to achieve something in the summer. And I'm not saying your children should vegetate in front of their screens, and I'm not saying that they need to be achievement-oriented killing beings either, right? They have to, what's the in-between? And how can we as parents show up in a way that allows kids to unfold and unravel, but also gives them, some fun and pleasurable opportunities as well? But I don't think it takes much. Leave your kid at the pool or take them to the park, and children figure it out. Yes. Does it take a lot of presence from us? Yes. We can't just dump them at school, pick them up 7 hours later. But isn't this a wonderful opportunity to connect, to unravel with your kid, to spend the morning in bed with them, to watch their TV with them? This is a time for parents, an invitation to let go of the stress of we have to get here on time and go to baseball practice on time. This is your time. We have 12 summers with our children, really. 12 summers before they become teenagers and go on to jobs. And so let's take their childhood and use this as an invitation for connection.
So if you could give parents one piece of advice, what would that be? And maybe, maybe it's something from your new book, maybe it's something describing an awakened parent, but what would your one piece of advice be?
I think the running thread through this new book, The Awakened Family, A Revolution in Parenting, is how can you always make the choice to connect to your children versus disconnect. And it outlines the concrete things you can do to connect and all the unconscious things we're doing which create disconnection. And if we can constantly pivot ourselves, okay, this is a moment, can I connect or I can disconnect? Can I enter my child's being and attune and then have them do and leave the doing aside? Because if I just enter as a sergeant for doing, I'll create disconnection. And if we can always be aware that connection always trumps anything else in the world, then we would have created an awakened, resilient relationship with our children.
Love that. Thank you.
Can you tell us some of the most profound transformations you've seen when a parent becomes fully awakened?
I think the most consistent revelation in parents is this aha sense of joy, freedom. Like all I had to do was let go and decide I'm not going to do it my entire neighborhood's way, my entire family's way, my entire culture's way. Oh, I had a choice to opt out of the madness. And when it's almost like my book is going to give them permission to opt out of the madness and just refuse to do it the anxious way anymore. And I get tears of joy, the sense of aha, the sense of relief. My mission is to recreate joy in our children's lives. I used to be a parent who used to get stressed out when my child wasn't producing. When I saw other children on the way to soccer or on the way to baseball and my child is resting on the couch and reading a book, it created anxiety in me. And I had to rework that and now celebrate the beingness and enter it and not see lack And I want to give that to parents, because when we do that, we recognize, oh, my child was already in abundance. My child wasn't in lack. And following our children's lead is the way to joyful and conscious parenting.
Beautiful.
That is really beautiful. So your first book, which Sue and I loved and devoured, I think in about 5 minutes when we read it, The Conscious Parent, was a New York Times bestseller. And it really connected with parents who read it. I know it did for me, and I'm speaking for Sue. I think it did for you too. And many of the parents that we work with daily. What about this approach do you think parents respond so positively to? And what do you hope they'll learn from your new book, The Awakened Family?
I think parents respond to this so positively. Well, those parents who are willing to be courageous to look within themselves, those respond positively because it empowers them, actually. It's by turning the lens from fixing your kid to working on your own issues, gives them something that they can concretely do. And in the process, they grow up, they mature, they soothe themselves, they finish their unfinished emotional baggage from childhood, they resolve their own issues, and they begin to realize, oh, this was all about my growth, and my kid came in to spark this within myself. This gives them something to do. The illusion is that if you fix your kid, you're doing something. You're only doing creating lack of worth, creating lack of resilience, because you're fixing them on the premise that something is wrong with them. And as long as somebody is told that something is wrong with them, they're never going to heal and grow in wholeness. They're always going to grow in lack. They're going to just increase their lack. So this turns it all around, gives parents something to do. But for parents who are not ready to be courageous, this is a scary process for them, and they resist it. They're not ready to do it because they don't want to release the control that the traditional model gives them, right? The traditional model says, fix your kid, control your kid, you have every right to do so, and if they don't listen, you can even discipline and yell and punish and shame. Who wants to give up that control? The parent who's been hungry for control from a childhood devoid of empowerment is going to run for that model. My model is not for people who are hungry for control. My model is for people who are hungry for growth. So The Awakened Family, my new book, takes the principles of the first two books, The Conscious Parent and Out of Control, and creates almost a step-by-step journey for parents to deconstruct their belief systems, deconstruct the inner child that's living within them, and teach them ways to deal with their own child, and then gives them concrete transformative skills that they can implement in their parenting.
That sounds fabulous. We cannot wait to get our hands on that book when it comes out next week. Sue and I are also going to be doing a book discussion for The Awakened Family beginning, I believe, June 21st. We're going to do a weekly book discussion on blab.im for anyone who wants to join us as we kind of enjoy and probably devour The Awakened Family as well. So where can people find The Awakened Family? Where should they go to purchase their copy?
Well, if they want to enter a free webinar with me, they should go right away to my website and pre-order the book and enter the free webinar. If it's too late for the free webinar, then they should just go to Amazon.com and type in The Awakened Family, A Revolution in Parenting, and get the book there. And book clubs are great ways to really integrate these ideas and assimilate them. So I'm really happy you're doing that.
We're excited too.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.